My name is Mabel Jennings. I am 72 years old, a retired diner owner from Maple Harbor, Oregon. For most of my life, I believed that love was shown through service. If someone needed food, I cooked. If they needed help, I was the first to raise my hand. That's how I raised my son, Lucas Reed, and how I thought I would welcome his new wife, Jenna. A week before Lucas's wedding, I was in my kitchen finishing a list of ingredients for the buffet I had promised to prepare. I had already committed to making the centerpieces, setting the hall, and working with vendors so the day would be perfect. Then I overheard a conversation that changed everything. My family had quietly decided that on top of all this, I was also going to be the free babysitter for 15 children during the entire reception. They never asked me. They never wondered if I wanted to spend the wedding chasing after kids instead of celebrating with my son. At that moment, something in me shifted. I realized that if I didn't draw a line, I would spend the rest of my days being treated as free labor instead of family. For months leading up to the wedding, I poured myself into planning. I wanted everything to shine for Lucas and Jenna. I told them not to worry about hiring a caterer because I would cook the entire buffet. I knew it would cost around $3,000 for the ingredients, but I told myself it was worth it. Love is expensive sometimes, but a mother's joy is seeing her child happy. My dining table was covered with notebooks, recipe cards, and lists. I wrote down how many pounds of chicken I would need, how many trays of lasagna, how many salads and desserts. I pictured the guests filling their plates, smiling, telling Lucas and Jenna how wonderful the food was. That was the picture in my mind. On top of the food, I offered to decorate the reception hall. I gathered mason jars and ribbons for centerpieces, tested out different flower arrangements, and even called vendors to make sure deliveries would arrive on time. Every detail felt personal, like I was wrapping my son's future in the care of my own hands. I didn't think of it as a burden. I thought of it as a gift. A gift of time, effort, and money. A gift given freely, or so I believed. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the truth found me. I stood at the kitchen sink, hands deep in soapy water, a timer beeping on the counter to remind me about cookies in the oven. Through the open patio door, voices floated in. At first, I barely noticed. Lucas was on the phone with work, and Jenna sat outside with her younger sister, Kelsey, who had come into town early for the wedding. I only half listened until I heard my name. That single word made me pause, my hands dripping suds. I moved closer to the window, careful not to be seen behind the curtain. "Don't worry about the kids," Jenna said sweetly. "Mabel has it covered. There are 15 children from the guest list, from toddlers to teenagers. She'll keep them busy so the adults can relax." Kelsey laughed. "That's genius. The old lady will chase the brats while everyone else enjoys the party. Perfect. No interruptions in the photos either." I froze. Jenna's voice changed, colder than the smile she always wore around me. "Mabel won't even realize she's being used. She's so eager to help. It's like having a free professional nanny for the night." The two of them laughed, loud enough to echo into my kitchen. Their laughter landed on me heavier than any insult I had ever known. My flour-stained hands trembled. I thought of all the months I had spent planning, the thousands of dollars I had set aside, the love I had poured into every detail. And now I was nothing more than free labor to them, a servant in an apron, invisible in my own family's celebration. I stood frozen at the window long after their laughter faded. My chest burned with something heavier than anger. It was disappointment, humiliation, and grief all tangled together. For 2 years I had welcomed Jenna like the daughter I never had. I shared family recipes, invited her into holiday traditions, and even called her sweetheart. I thought she respected me, but respect, I realized, had never been part of her plan. I didn't storm outside. I didn't confront her in front of Lucas. That would have turned into a shouting match, and shouting was never my way. Instead, I went upstairs, sat on the edge of my bed, and let the weight of it all settle. On my nightstand were photos of Lucas as a boy, his first communion, his college graduation, trips to the beach. Those memories reminded me that I had already survived widowhood, raised a son alone, and kept a business running when life was hardest. I was not about to let myself be reduced to a babysitter without a choice. That night, I picked up the phone and called my oldest friend, Darlene Price. We had been through everything together. "Darlene," I said, "I need your help with a plan." She didn't hesitate. "If someone crossed you, Mabel, then we're about to make history. Tell me what you have in mind." The next morning, I poured myself a strong cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. Step 1, cancel everything. If they thought my work was free, then they would see what it meant when I withdrew it. I started with the caterers I had arranged for bulk ingredients. "This is Mabel Jennings," I explained calmly. "I need to cancel my orders for Saturday." A few tried to charge a cancellation fee, but after some firm negotiation, I managed to close every account with only minor penalties. Then I called the florist. The centerpieces I had been planning, the extra arrangements I had promised, gone with one phone call. Last, I contacted the rental company about the decorations. By lunchtime, everything I had prepared for months had been undone. It wasn't bitterness guiding my hands, it was clarity. A gift is only a gift when it's offered freely, not when it's assumed. If they had asked me kindly, I might have said yes, but they had chosen to use me without my consent. That was the line I would not allow them to cross. I folded a letter and placed it neatly on the kitchen table where Lucas always sat. In simple words I wrote, "You gave me a job I never agreed to, so I'm taking back the gifts I promised. Love, but with dignity, Mom." By Friday evening, my bags were packed. Just a small suitcase with clothes for 2 days, my medications, and a book one had been meaning to read. Darlene pulled into my driveway at sunrise the next morning, her old station wagon humming like always. She stepped out with 2 bags of her own and a grin that stretched wide. "Ready for freedom, Mabel?" she asked, hugging me tight. "More than ready," I said. "For once, I'm going to spend my savings on myself." We drove 2 hours west to Driftwood Springs Spa, a quiet retreat perched on the Oregon coast. The salty air hit us before we even saw the water. Waves crashed in the distance, gulls circled overhead, and the lobby smelled of lavender and eucalyptus. The receptionist handed us chilled towels and glasses of citrus water. "Welcome, ladies. Your rooms are ready, and your first treatments begin at 11. For the first time in months, I felt light. No trays of food to prepare, no centerpieces to arrange, no lists waiting to be checked off. Just me, my best friend, and a weekend of rest. I smiled to myself. If love had once been my labor, now it was going to be my freedom. The morning of the wedding, I woke with a rare kind of energy. Sunlight spilled across the ocean, and for once I didn't feel the weight of responsibility pulling me down. At 11:30, just as a masseuse pressed warm stones along my shoulders, my phone started buzzing on the table beside me. It rang again and again until finally I turned it off. For the first time in years, I chose silence. When I powered it back on hours later, there were 17 missed calls and a dozen frantic messages. I finally answered one. On the other end, Lucas's voice was frantic. "Mom, where are you? Guests are here, the caterers are asking for the buffet, what's going on?" I leaned back in my chair on the spa terrace, calm as the sea below. "I'm at the coast, son. You have a wedding to host." "What do you mean? You promised the buffet," he shouted. "I promised when I believed I was your guest, not your staff," I said evenly. In the background, I could hear children screaming, chairs scraping, and someone yelling about a cake being knocked over. Then Jenna came on the line, her voice sharp, stripped of its sweetness. "Mabel, you can't do this. There are 150 people here. You left us with nothing." I smiled faintly. "You have everything you planned for, dear, just not me." When Lucas begged, I began calmly running the math. 15 kids, 6 hours, $10 an hour, that's $900 for proper childcare. Much cheaper than the $3,000 I had set aside for food. Silence followed. Then, for the first time, I said her sister's name aloud. "Perhaps Kelsey can help. I heard she thinks I'm very good with kids." The line went so quiet I could almost hear their shame. I set the phone face down on the table and let out a long breath. Darlene sat across from me, swirling her glass of white wine. "Well?" she asked, her eyes dancing with curiosity. "They're in chaos," I said. "Children running wild, food missing, guests upset. And for once, it's not my problem." We clinked glasses and let the sun warm our faces. Below us, waves rolled in steady rhythm, reminding me that life could be calm if I chose it. I thought about the years I had confused love with labor, believing that the more I worked, the more I proved my devotion. Today I understood the difference. Love should be given freely, not demanded as a duty. As if to confirm that, a message buzzed through on my phone. It was from a number I didn't know. "Miss Jennings, this is Paula Jensen. I'm the mother of one of the children at the wedding. Several of us were told someone would be watching our kids, but it turns out no one is. We're very upset. What they did to you is not right." I showed the screen to Darlene. She smirked. "See? Even strangers can tell respect when they see it, or when they don't." I leaned back, feeling lighter. For once, I chose peace over pleasing. By the time evening fell, my phone was a storm of missed calls and desperate texts. Lucas wrote one after another. "Mom, we had to order pizza for the guests. It cost $1,200. Another read, "The parents are furious. 3 families already left. And then Jenna is crying in the bathroom, saying you ruined her wedding." The words didn't sting the way he intended, they only confirmed that they still didn't understand. They thought my absence was the disaster, when in truth the disaster was their assumption that I would serve without being asked. Close to midnight, one message caught me off guard. "Mom, why are you doing this to me? I thought you loved me." That one pressed hard on my chest, but I steadied myself and typed back slowly. "Lucas, it's precisely because I love you that I had to do this. Love is not permission to be disrespected." I put the phone down after that, switched it to silent, and climbed into bed with the sound of ocean waves in the background. The line had been drawn, and I knew I couldn't step back over it no matter how much it hurt. 2 days later, the doorbell rang just as the afternoon sun dipped low over Maple Harbor. I opened the door to find Lucas standing there alone. His shoulders slumped, his tie crooked, his eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. For a moment, he looked like the little boy who used to run home after skinning his knee. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. I stepped aside and he walked into the living room. He sat on the sofa while I took my usual armchair. Silence stretched between us until he finally spoke. "Mom, I have to apologize. I let Jenna say things I should have stopped. I heard her laughing with Kelsey, and I didn't defend you. I thought if I ignored it, it wouldn't matter. But it does. I treated you like someone who solves problems, not like my mother." I folded my hands in my lap and spoke evenly. "Lucas, forgiveness isn't built from words. It's built from actions. If things are going to change, here's what I need. First, you ask me before assuming I'll do something. Second, I'm a guest at family events, not part of the staff. Third, when I say no, that answer stands without guilt or manipulation. And fourth, you defend me if your wife or anyone disrespects me." His head dropped lower with each word, but when I finished he nodded firmly. "You're right, Mom. I should have defended you from the start. I understand now." I studied his face. For the first time in days I felt hope, but I kept my guard steady. Actions would tell the rest. The next afternoon, right at 4 o'clock, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Jenna. She stood on the porch with no makeup, her hair pulled back into a plain ponytail, and a blouse that looked borrowed. Gone was the polished smile she always wore. In its place was a nervous tremble. "Thank you for seeing me, Miss Jennings," she whispered. I gestured for her to sit on the sofa. She perched on the edge, hands twisting together. "I need to apologize," she began, her voice catching. "The things I said with Kelsey, they were cruel and disrespectful. I knew better, but I said them anyway." "Why?" I asked gently. She stared at the carpet. "Because I lost my mom when I was 15. Since then, I never knew how to handle older women in my life. I felt like I'd never measure up to you, so I made you smaller in my mind, and I mocked you to feel safer." I let her words hang in the air. "Jenna, I appreciate your honesty, but trust isn't rebuilt with talk. I will believe you when your actions show respect." She nodded quickly. "I understand. I'll prove it. I'll ask instead of assuming. I'll respect your no. And I'll start by telling Kelsey the truth, that we planned to use you, and that it was wrong." That caught my attention. "Good. Because this second chance is the only one you'll get." Jenna swallowed hard, but her eyes held steady. For the first time I saw sincerity instead of performance. 2 weeks passed in a silence that felt strangely peaceful. No calls asking for favors, no texts assuming I would drop everything to help. At first I thought they might be angry, but then I realized they were giving me space, something they had never done before. The test came on a Friday evening when Lucas called. His voice sounded cautious. "Mom, I want to ask you something. Jenna's birthday is tomorrow, and I planned a surprise party. I already hired a caterer, booked the venue, and sent the invitations. I was hoping you might help me with the decorations. You have such a good eye, and of course I'll pay you for your time." I paused, listening carefully. This wasn't the old Lucas. He hadn't assumed. He hadn't guilted me. He had asked. "Lucas," I said, smiling into the phone, "you don't need to pay me. I'd love to help with decorations as a gift. But thank you for offering." The next day, as we strung lights across his backyard, I realized something important. Respect wasn't just words and an apology, it was woven into the way they treated me now. Months rolled by, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. Lucas and Jenna no longer called me with lists of things they expected me to handle. Instead, they invited me to dinners, asked for my opinion, and included me as family, not as help. It felt different. It felt right. One evening, Lucas and Jenna came over with glowing faces. Jenna took my hand, her eyes shining. "Mabel, we have news. We're expecting a baby." Tears pricked my eyes. "I'm going to be a grandmother," I whispered. But what she said next touched me even deeper. "We want you to choose the role you want. If you'd like to be the grandma who comes by for tea and stories, wonderful. If you'd rather babysit occasionally, also wonderful. It's your choice. We won't assume." I smiled, a warmth spreading through me. Then I choose to be a grandmother who helps when it's truly needed, but also a woman with her own life, her own plans, and her own dreams. For the first time, my love was respected on my terms. A year after that disastrous wedding, I held a copy of my first book in my hands. I called it Cooking with Care, Serving with Dignity. Inside were family recipes, but also reflections on what it means to give from love without being taken for granted. At the launch party, Jenna introduced me with pride, and Lucas stood by my side. It wasn't just a book, it was proof of how far we had all come. As I looked out at the guests that evening, I shared one final thought. Love offered freely isn't free labor. Respect is the ingredient that makes family meals and family bonds truly nourishing. That is the lesson I carry now at 73. Boundaries don't destroy love, they protect it. If my story touched you, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so this message can reach someone who needs it today.